Hello and welcome to A Word with Ward, a podcast focused on the high-growth world of data centers. In Series 2, I'm going to be speaking to a broad array of people across the globe who work in the data center development and investment space. If you've got an interest in the industry, these are the people that you're going to want to hear from. I think I'm going to learn a thing or two along the way, and if you give it a listen, you might too. Hello, Oliver, and welcome to the show. Good to see you.
Hi, Ward. Pleasure being here.
I think we've known each other for maybe 5 or 6 years now. Been really interested in following your career over that period of time. I think you've been in the data center and the telco industry prior to that for 20 odd years now. I don't know. Is it okay to call you an industry veteran at this point?
Veteran maybe it makes me sound a bit old, but I guess yes. To be fair.
Oh yeah, that's why I asked. Some people don't quite like that term.
In terms of grey here, I'm still working on it.
For anyone who isn't familiar with you, please can you give an overview of your background and your career to this point?
My name is Oliver Schiebel. I am from Germany, currently based in London, but nonetheless, my background goes more or less back to Germany. How did I come to the data center industry? Funny story, because, a lot of people actually came to the data center world from construction or from, the computer room environment. As you said, I'm a real telco person. So I used to, back in the days, really, build, fiber networks and fiber network infrastructure. So I worked at Deutsche Telekom's Net Management Center back in the days, actually routing SDH, connections through their fiber networks. IP peering and IP traffic became big, actually got me into that. Yeah. So when the first big network providers tried to monetize the IP traffic between their networks, between their customers and the big content providers. And that is actually how I got into back in the days, data centers were more or less carrier hotels, because their focus was to, either connect those telcos and exchange voice or IP data, or, serve, enterprise customers back in the days. Yeah. And that's how I started my career, actually, helping Interxion, building their famous Interxion Frankfurt campus in terms of connectivity and carrier density. And that took me through more or less throughout the whole process of, the content delivery networks becoming bigger, and all the ad tech businesses, then the hyperscale world, where we did, some of the first hyperscaler deals with the big American and Asian hyperscalers in Frankfurt. And from then the journey went on to, through multiple roles as managing director for data center providers. So probably fair to say that I'm a bit of a jack of all trades. My personal background is more sales and marketing, but through the years, developing data centers, putting data centers into operations, looking into their design and engineering. I'm probably a person that knows a bit of everything. The last thing I did was to build, Mainova Webhouse, a data center business for the Frankfurt utility, Mainova, one of the 10 largest utilities in Germany, actually, that also decided, with, Frankfurt obviously being a huge data center hub, that they should invest into the industry, where I built a data center business for them called Mainova Webhouse that recently got, 50.1% of their shares sold to BlackRock, which was, the transaction that I still concluded before I now moved on to what now is called hscale. We just launched less than 2 months ago, which is a new data center platform backed by Bain Capital.
I suppose that's the main reason we're talking today. I saw your appointment a few months back. I was really interested in having a chat with you to understand a bit more about what the plans are going to be. Look, I think it's probably, I don't know, it does feel a little bit like there's been a conveyor belt of data center startups over the last couple of years in particular, but this one definitely caught my eye. I think even before you launched, you updated your LinkedIn profile as Bain Capital backed platform before the branded launch, and that caught my eye. I did some work, if we're going back maybe 7-8 years, I did some work with a Bain Capital backed business in Asia, Bridge data centers. Bain have a significant data center portfolio in China and Southeast Asia, and not to mention that probably top 10 to 15 PE firms in the world in terms of size, at least I would have thought. And that's just a great combination, because you've got not just the deep pockets that everyone needs to compete in this industry, but a really well-educated capital partner as well. But can you maybe talk to me about what was Bain Capital's vision when they engaged you about this opportunity, and talk to us about what the plans are for the business?
I think you already touched upon some of the points. So to be fair, I agree. There were a couple of startups in the data center world, recently. To be fair, I probably ran one the last 3 years before I joined as well. So feels hard to complain about that. I think there's probably some types of startups that we saw in the last year. What I did at Webhouse and what we tried to do was become a local brand that focuses on one specific market and tries to outperform the big players in that specific market to adopt to that market faster and better than others do. Yeah, and you also see some new players that really aim for the big game. Yeah, and as you rightfully said, Bain Capital certainly has the backing to aim for the big game, and that's what they do. To me personally, their activity in Asia was really interesting. So, the Chin Data investment in China, Chin Data being the second largest Chinese data center provider today, and also Bridge with, I think they're like 500 megawatts of capacity in APAC now. So they have delivered substantial capacity in a very successful fashion. Their vision clearly was to do the same thing in EMEA or in Europe. They also have an investment in the US on the southern east coast, which is called DC Blocks, and not such a big play, but it's more or less, Europe is more or less, used to be their blind spot on the map. And I think what they did really well, they prepared properly for this. They used the learnings that they had from their Asian activities, also in terms of structuring, taking Chin Data IPO, taking it private again, restructuring assets, also with Bridge Data. So all that experience and understanding flew into that business. And clearly their vision is to become one of the more substantial players in the European market. And, we could probably see from our launch that they're really also not just eager, but actually really set up to deliver against that promise. Yeah.
I know of DC Blocks. I didn't realize they were also a Bain Capital backed business. It looks as though the strategy was to acquire a seed asset but correct me if I'm wrong, in AQ Compute, and that's now part of been rebranded as hscale.
Yeah.
So, but it also looks as though, and you've just talked about this, but it seems as though there's been a lot of work done prior to the launch in terms of incubating this platform, because looking on the website, you've got some pretty large campuses under development in Spain, Italy, Norway. So can you maybe just expand a little bit on some of that stuff?
Yeah, exactly. So AQ Compute was acquired as a potential seed asset. And to be fair, not just because of the fact that they have an operational asset in Oslo, but also the fact that they have substantial land opportunities in Oslo still, yeah, but also in other markets like Barcelona and Madrid. Barcelona, where we're currently also already developing a 50 megawatt campus, but Madrid, where there's also substantial assets. We believe that their partnership is really interesting with Aquila, who have been the previous owner of AQ Compute, because they have a very substantial clean energy business called ACE Aquila Clean Energy. So, for example, that Madrid site that we're developing has a huge, solar park next to it. The majority of the capacity, depending on time of the day, / even the full capacity of the data center campus, will actually be generated from renewable sources with, direct procured energy from that solar park next door, which I think is an interesting opportunity. You're right. So, Bain has, as I said earlier, properly set up this business and already, established relationship, went out to, source the executive team more or less and bring them on board in parallel to that AQ Compute acquisition, as well as also land banking some of the substantial sites that we're now presenting to the market. So, for example, both Milan assets, which will be 150 megawatt plus IT have been sourced by Bain directly. So they more or less took routes to set the business up in the background for a proper market launch, which yes helps us. The current pipeline that we have is, I would say, unusual compared to other market entrants. It's rarely the case that a new business enters the market with such a magnitude of opportunities and sites under control, with actually also the majority really already owned by us, and a few that are still under exclusivity with partners of ours, but the majority is already owned, giving us a gigawatt of grid capacity to develop, which is quite substantial in the key markets that you mentioned, being Oslo, Norway, being Milan, Italy, being Barcelona, Madrid, Zaragoza in Spain, and potentially also the flat D markets, where we currently focusing on Frankfurt and London specifically, where we have also some interesting opportunities that we cannot yet disclose to the market, but we think that we will also be set up with one or ideally two of the major flat D markets in the portfolio as well.
Okay, yeah, interesting, and I'm glad you covered that, because I was going to ask whether the strategy was to focus on countries outside of the tier one markets, but it seems as though it's going to be a mixture. And also glad you referenced the team that's been assembled, because from the outside looking in, certainly seems like an incredibly strong leadership team with deep industry experience. I know Paul, I know Bruce, and I know of Abed. So all those people have a great pedigree, and you've got some shared history at former companies, which I'm sure is going to be very helpful as well. But can you maybe just talk me through some of the the strengths of the team, and also not forgetting the team that you've inherited from AQ Compute as well.
It also is of course nice for me to work with people that I already know from the past. With people like Paul and Bruce. I even go back to Data Global Switch, which is already like a couple of years back, but it's that's probably also the story of this industry, that paths cross more than once, given that it still is a very small industry. And you're right, I think we have some of the best of the industry in their specific traits, with Bruce as the chief development officer. He has obviously substantial background in developing sites across Europe and other continents as well, but mainly in Europe, which is really helpful. Paul, who has been in sales and commercial roles and has good relationship with the key hyperscalers as our chief commercial officer, but also has actually worked in construction, has developed and rebuilt data centers. So he does not just have the relationship capabilities, but also really understands the actual business of building data centers. Very helpful. We have Abed that has developed designs for other data center providers in the past, and has developed base designs for lots of data centers built across Europe. That's really helpful. We also have already a very experienced CFO. She hasn't joined us yet. She's not yet on the webpage, but she will join us in less than 2 weeks. Actually, really looking forward to her. Also, again, very senior person with a strong experience. So we believe that we have a very strong senior executive membership team. But to your point, and I think that matters as well, although we have just launched, we have already also sourced all the head of departments. So it's not just a top layer. We're not just 5 guys announcing a new business. So back to the point that a lot of startups popped up like mushrooms. This is actually a full-fledged business. We're now 35 people already. All the heads of, also some people with very strong experience in the industry, very good relationship. So we believe that we probably still have to prove ourselves in delivering under the hscale brand, but we've put together a team that has delivered and against the hyperscalers' expectation with great success in the past. We're optimistic that we can continue this under the new brand, and we were also quite successful in integrating that existing AQ Compute team into the new world. Yeah, so they have been tucked under the hscale umbrella umbrella very successfully, and we're actually looking forward to growing further.
Fantastic. Really does seem like all of the ingredients that are there, the asset portfolio, the development portfolio, the team, everything seems set up so that you can really deliver, and in terms of speed of execution. So as we've discussed, it is becoming more competitive in the industry. Can you talk to me a little bit about what you see as some of the biggest challenges that the data center sector needs to solve for its customers in Europe, and how hscale plan to do some of that?
What's the key challenge of the hyperscalers today in Europe? I would say it's sourcing data center capacity. It's not as easy for our customers as it used to be 10 years ago, where you just went to the go-to data center developers that were still developing, a lot of them at risk because they came from a colo background and you could just move in. Those times have passed. So I think it's become more challenging for them to really source the capacity they need. It's become more challenging for them to predict their future needs, and that's mainly because of substantial design changes. We have been delivering into this industry against design specs of the hyperscalers that kept pretty much the same over 5 years. There were iterations, improvements, but ultimately you delivered the same air-cooled data hall for air-cooled racks over a very long period of time, increasing density, replacing some kind of kit. But in a nutshell, it was the same thing. The whole liquid-to-liquid cooling design took the hyperscalers to reevaluate their designing principles and actually reassessing them in a very short time period, which I think will remain to be a challenge over the next years. If you look at the amount of GPU improvements and new NVIDIA chips coming out, in very short time periods, you have to understand that, a data center with an average delivery period of 3 to 4 years will actually have seen, 3 iterations of new chips and new components before it's actually put into operations. And what we saw recently a lot, especially impacted through the Ukraine crisis and through COVID earlier, is that those lengthy delivery time frames and the adoption required over the time, impact, cost and time of delivery. And that is, I think, the key issue that the industry faces today. And maybe to your point, how do we look at those things differently like competitors, or do we have a secret sauce? Probably not the secret sauce to fix everything, but we believe that we had a huge opportunity now because we know all those liquid-to-liquid cooling design requirements. We know the previous air cooling design requirements, and compared to some of our competitors, we don't really have to, adopt our legacy development and legacy designs to the new world. We had the benefit of really just now designing a brand new base design that actually, we call hybrid, like others do as well. But I think the beauty of it is actually it's liquid to liquid first, but it has the capability to deliver air cooled and liquid as a hybrid in the same core and shell. So the building that we permit, we can then still choose to deliver air or liquid cooled deployments in the same building and also pivot at a later point of time. So if a customer needs changes in a specific market because there's more high computing demand, more requirements for performance processing instead of storage, for example, you can just shift data halls to different setups quite quickly. And we do believe that adaptability becomes more important in the probably more changing years that we're now seeing in the next immediate future.
It also sounds like, from what you were saying earlier, that you're looking at some different ways of powering your facilities, which will be helpful to the customer. And we all know the power landscape globally is becoming increasingly complex and challenging. Has your background leading a data center business for a major utility influenced how hscale is going to approach site selection and your overall energy strategy?
Working for a utility or closely with a utility obviously helped me understand, how they operate, how they take decisions, how they budget fund, where they see their returns in their business, which is quite helpful. It's really helpful to understand what they want to achieve with their business, to find a sweet spot to partner and cooperate with them. Yeah. Yet on the other hand, sadly, like a friend of mine always put, having good relationship with the utility people just means that, I get a polite no, where others don't get such a polite no. So, you can't miraculously make, power appear where there is none, sadly. Yeah, so I think, one of the key challenges that we have across Europe is that, the grids are actually just constrained. And, building grid connection, building that infrastructure is usually a very lengthy process. A, to construction time and B, to permitting. Having that knowledge and understanding that, obviously also helps you to better assess opportunities. Yeah, where some real estate agent says, it's just, I don't know, a 2 kilometer fiber run. Don't worry, we'll fix it. If you have the experience, you look at it and you think like, if you haven't spoken to that mayor, if you understand how the permitting in that specific country works, it's maybe just not 2 kilometers fiber run. It's actually, 5 years approval process before anybody, ever touches cable. Yet, the issue is actually in principle still the same, that it's just tougher and tougher to source that grid capacity, and that's why we're also, targeting those partnerships with green energy suppliers that can also deliver at scale, at the amount of scale that we need for our data centers. Obviously power generation for 50, 100 megawatt IT campuses is also not easy. It consumes a lot of space.
Yeah, we're working with some developers in the US at the moment who are even going as far as building their own power generation on some of these some of their sites. Can you maybe talk to us a little bit more about that clean energy partnership that you've got in? I think you said it was in one of the Spanish markets that you're going into.
Yeah.
And is that a strategy you're going to try and adopt in other areas?
So we do. So maybe in terms of sustainability, our new base design is just a very efficient design, which certainly helps. I think, one of the key aspects of a modern data center is that it should be very power efficient in its nature, that losses are just minimal. But on the other hand, we see opportunity to partner with renewable energy generation and also with battery storage providers. We've also assessed, what you just, described. There's, multiple concepts of on-site power generation. A lot still depend on some kind of fossil component if you really want to stabilize the grid to a level that you need for a data center, because there is a permanent requirement for power consumption. But, we also believe that, batteries will play an important role in the future. And we have come to understand that where you can not just combine that power generation component with the data center, but actually with the grid, so that for example, a solar and wind park and a battery storage unit helps the grid on the one hand, but also helps the asset. Yeah, that's a typical win-win situation, and that's also a situation where, let's say, that infrastructure becomes affordable. And also can be financed ideally by a business outside of the actual data center world, which is very helpful, because in the data center world, you look at different, return timeframes that you would typically look in the infrastructure world. Yeah, and combining those activities in the data center business is usually challenging. If you have partners that can monetize those assets through their infrastructure funds in their infrastructure business, it becomes easier than if you have to try and attempt to do that for a specific data center development in a constrained market. Yeah, and that's the approach we're taking. So we're having a partnership with Aquila Clean Energy that is very strong on the whole Iberian Peninsula. So naturally in Spain, but also in Portugal. So we believe that there is future opportunity there to extend this, and we're also looking at other markets to ideally, find opportunities to provide that green energy directly sourced to the data center, also as a bit of a unique selling point to our hyperscale customers.
Yeah, it's a area of the industry we're doing a hell of a lot more work in at the moment in terms of helping developers to build out those utilities teams, and doing an increasing amount of work of taking people from renewable energy developers or utilities and bringing them into this industry. So yeah, it's really fascinating how this stuff's playing out at the moment. Okay, well, I'm going to end on a question that I always ask people. So can I ask you what, in your opinion, people in the industry aren't talking about that you think they probably should be?
I think what probably really nobody is talking about at this point in time is the topic of cybersecurity. Yeah, I think, we as data center developers and data center business, have now become a substantial asset class, which also, attracts hackers and attackers from the outside world that we haven't seen in the past. Yeah, that's also something we focused on from day one, and we noticed that especially with our launch, obviously the amount of attacks that we could defend and protect ourselves against have substantially increased. I think that is yet something that currently sees too little focus, because attacks, data loss, any kind of data breach in this industry has certainly effect on the reputation of the providers, potentially also on the end customer. We don't have access to our end customers' data, so naturally everybody's data is protected, but still I think it's something we as a business have to focus on, that we have to protect our client data and also our employees' data, and we're probably now entering a decade where we become as vulnerable as other large brands, because it has just become understood outside of our industry that it's become a big but also a very financially strong reputation that is exposed to a larger public audience than it used to 10 years ago. Yeah.
Well, look, Oliver, it's always a pleasure to see you and chat with you. I really do think hscale are the platform to watch in Europe over the coming years, and wish you and the wider team all the best as you develop the platform.
Thank you, Ward.